The city of Evanston, Illinois no longer wants to use the term landlord to refer to property owners who are renting their units. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the city of Evanston, Illinois, which is a Chicago suburb. So it has to do with the term landlord, okay? There's a lot of people out there, there's property owners who don't like the term because they see a very negative connotation with it, right? And so they don't use that terminology, whatever, right? I like the term. I do, okay? I think that everybody knows what it is, what you're talking about. It's, very old, very common, and it lets people know that, hey, yeah, you own the property and you're renting it out. Okay, it's pretty simple. So, I love it. I honestly love the term landlord. I don't want to see the name changed, but, keeping that in mind, I understand the perspective of especially landlords in places where there are a lot of people who don't like landlords there, okay? Like where I live, I can tell anybody I'm a landlord. Nobody's going to get mad at me or anything, Everybody has respect for you. That seems to be the difference between a place where there's strong landlord rights versus a place where the tenants have more rights, okay? It seems like up in a place like, Illinois, in Evanston in particular, they're trying to strip landlords of their rights, and, maybe the tenants treat the landlords there with much more disrespect, and so that's why they're getting into the name change. But I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, and leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Do you like the term landlord, or do you think that there's some other term that might work better? And what is that term? Go ahead and put a comment down below and let me know what you think would be a better term than landlord. Okay, so anyway, let me get into this article. They kind of talk a little bit about some of the new, housing provider rules that they are thinking of passing up there too. This article is coming from evanstonnow.com, and it says, city to give landlords a new name. Yeah, I mean, you can try to, change the language that people use, but people are going to use what they like and what they're used to. So I really doubt that it's going to make much of a difference. Anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. You may have wanted to give a landlord you didn't like any number of new names, but the city is about to write one into law. If the city council adopts an ordinance up for introduction Monday night, your landlord will officially become a housing provider, courtesy of the city's language police, headed by Alderman Devon Reed, 8th. Anytime you can replace a 2-syllable word with a 5-syllable phrase is a victory for some folk, although at least some sources suggest it will be harder for tenants to disparage their bureaucratic-sounding housing provider than their vaguely feudal landlord. Yeah, they always, landlord's a feudal term, and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's feudal or not. When I'm researching articles, looking for just stories for my videos, I just type the word landlord into Google News, and, it just brings me back just tons of articles all over the world, and it's always, they use that same term. So yeah, it's pretty easy to find stuff when you have a very easy, to remember term like landlord. That's part of the reason I like it. But there are different definitions depending on where you're at. Like, for example, I believe in the UK, they have what they call a pub landlord, which, as far as I could tell, is like a bartender. Okay, they literally just are somebody who runs the bar. I mean, it's weird that they call those people landlords, but whatever. Yeah, I've come across a lot of articles about these pub landlords, and I was just kind of like, it took me a while to figure out what exactly they were talking about. If these people were renting space out in the pub or what, But anyway, it's just one of those things where I just think that the easiest thing to do is just to leave the words alone, and that you're not going to convince anybody to use the term housing provider going into the future, so it's just kind of a waste of time trying to change it. Otherwise, the new 33-page ordinance mostly rewrites the city's existing landlord-tenant ordinance to make it more closely track the similar ordinance adopted by Cook County in 2021. The county ordinance is what would apply in Evanston if the city didn't have its own rules. But instead of just repealing the city's RLTO and going with the county ordinance, the city's Housing Community Development Committee has spent more than 2 years of often acrimonious meetings coming up with its own version. Yeah, and I hate to surprise you, I'm recording this after that meeting, right? But I had already read that the changes that they were trying to make, they didn't pass. Okay, so that's good news for landlords or housing providers. That's good news for housing providers. But if those new rule changes that made things harder for the landlords or housing providers in Evanston didn't pass, then I'm assuming that the terminology also didn't change. And I wasn't able to find a good article talking about more details of why it failed or any of that, so I'm just going to continue with this one. And perhaps the most significant one, Evanston would require landlords to provide 90 days notice to tenants of lease non-renewal, rather than the 60 days provided by the county ordinance or the 30 days in existing city ordinance. Several of the most contentious ideas for the ordinance rewrite have not yet made it out of committee and are not included in the new ordinance. Those include requiring landlords to have a just cause for any lease non-renewal, providing notice to tenants of the reason for a non-renewal, creation of an anti-displacement fund, and giving tenants a collective right to purchase any rental property that went up for sale. So yeah, those are things that were not going to be included in the proposal, right? The main thing was this being forced to give tenants a 90-day notice if you intended to not renew their lease, right? So it didn't exactly go as far as like a just cause eviction protections, but it still requires a landlord to give a very long amount of notice before they're able to get their unit back. And I don't like that, of course. Okay, like I said, every little change that they make to these laws to make it easier for the tenants makes it more expensive for the landlords to operate their business, which leads to, you guessed it, higher rents. Okay, and they're always talking about how they want more affordable housing, they want more people to be housing providers, and yet they make it as difficult as possible for landlords to operate their business. So less people want to do it, which means the housing costs are just, consistently high. So anyway, like I've mentioned before, Illinois is definitely not the worst place when it comes to these more left-leaning states in terms of, landlord rights. It actually is not too bad, but that doesn't mean that I would necessarily want to invest there, and especially not in Evanston or Chicago itself. Okay, a lot of these places, they are not the kind of places where it is, just worth it to deal with all the nonsense.